Okay. Well, my name is Ryan Forbes, and
Also known as.
also known as Rainforest. That is
Primarily known as Rainforest.
That is only. You will only refer to me as Rainforest, so just so there's no confusion on that front. And um, let's see. I've done a whole bunch of things. I've worked in software development. I've been a government contractor, and I've been most recently I've been in marketing, I think, and that's my primary work. But also, I also spent 6 years in prison, where, with the help of this guy right here, we founded Wayword Press, which is now our comic book brand, and we ended up publishing a comic book. And so now I'm going to pass it over to this guy so he can introduce himself.
Now, my name is Malone, also just known as Malone. And I'm a comic book artist, I'm a writer, and I was in prison for 30 years. Since I was 17 years old, all the way up until I was 47 years old, I was in prison in Texas, which is where I met him in the last 2 or 3 years of my incarceration. I was working on, drawing comic books and so forth while I was in prison. Comic books were really a lifeline for me and kept me alive, kept me sane over the course of 30 years. And eventually turned it into an actual real comic that's turning into a career.
That's the hope for both of us. We would love to make this our full-time jobs and to do that full-time.
And we both have day jobs still.
Yes, in the meantime. But let's start off for me. I've always loved comics. I used to draw on everything when I was a kid, which was when I started hearing you need to stop doing that, because I was doing it too much. And when I went off to school, when I was deciding between which school to go to, I wanted to go to an art school, but my family never outright said it, but it was very strongly suggested I go to a technical school as opposed to an art school. And then that's when I started. After that, college was when I started my career as a software developer. And then I was drinking one night, I blacked out, and I ended up getting in a car accident which killed someone. And that's what led to my sentence of 6 years in prison in Texas. And so when I was in prison, I had a lot of friends and a lot of family who were supportive. And there's one friend in particular, I said, because we used to always read comics, I told him, just send me comics, send me really good comics so I can read them and keep up with them. And he did. He sent me all sorts of comics. He sent me Fables, and I was reading Fables until Texas saw someone in the mailroom noticed that there was some nudity along the way, and then banned all of Fables for the entire TDC system. So, which TDC is the Texas Department of Corrections or Criminal Justice, as they're now known. I started asking for Why the Last Man, because that was really big when I was reading comics, and that got quickly banned as well. So I'm like, all right, just send me Marvel and DC, because those aren't going to get banned. And I started reading, one of my favorite heroes is Green Lantern. And my favorite Green Lantern is Kyle Rayner. And they had basically just got done kicking Kyle Rayner off of as the main Green Lantern, putting Hal Jordan front and center. But they had given him this book called New Guardians, which I really got into, I really enjoyed. And then when the series ended and they rebooted it, they acted as if, they rebooted it. It was like it never happened. There was nothing. Kyle Rayner went down way lower than he was before. And I was really upset because there was this character that they didn't know how to write for. And I was like, you guys just don't, no one understands this character. So I wrote a story from based on what was happening in New Guardians, and to show what this character should be. And then when I met Malone, I had an unfinished version of this story, and he pushed me to finish it.
Actually, no. Whenever he first showed or told me about the story and told me it was about Kyle Rayner, I was immediately just, Kyle Rayner. And I mean, I'm one of these guys in comic books that I never see any reason why to change the classics. I think if you have to change it, it's just a lack of imagination on the writers or the artists. They just don't see the potential of it, of what's really there. And so whenever he said Kyle Rayner, I'm thinking, Kyle Rayner's not the Green Lantern. Hal Jordan's the Green Lantern, always will be. But I went ahead and endured it and read his read his story. And I have to admit, after I got done reading it, I was a Kyle Rayner fan. This guy wrote not only the greatest Green Lantern story that I've ever read in my life, but he wrote a great Kyle Rayner Green Lantern story that rewrote my whole entire thinking on the thing. It was fantastic. Back to you.
But yeah, so that really pushed me into writing comics and writing stories. And when I found out Malone could draw, I was like, well, you need to draw this comic. You need to do that. And we were trying to figure out where to start. So there's this whole storyline takes place in a parallel world where everyone has Green Lantern powers. And so it takes place in a Gotham City where basically the Penguin, if you know anything about the Green Lantern stuff, but the Penguin has the orange ring, and he's killed off all of the Gotham villains, and now he's summoning them with the orange ring and attacking Kyle Rayner, Hal Jordan, and a mysterious teen lantern who's appeared on this world. And so Malone told me a little bit.
Quickly, as I started drawing this, I realized he literally put every single Gotham villain in almost every panel of this thing. It's impossible for an artist to do. And he's got 6 panels on a page, and you have to draw every single character from the DC universe almost in each panel. So I said, you have obviously never drawn a comic book. So I suggested, before you go ahead and draw your own book one time. I mean, even if it's not good or whatever, just draw your own book one time. It will change the way you write forever. And thus he did.
Right. That actually, the next thing I wrote was I was reading The Death and Return of Superman, which, if you haven't read it, that is the most bizarre book that they totally missed the boat on making that a whole series of films. Just like they could have done a million things with it, but instead, like one thing that came out of it was this character Thorn, which she looks exactly like Poison Ivy. There's a dead ringer for Poison Ivy, but she's just crazier. She like it was the 90s, so they were trying to make this dark superhero. But when I was reading this character, the only way it made sense is if she's insane. She was killing off bad guys because someone stole her VHS. Like, it was insane. And so then I wrote that book, and I realized, oh, I can't have her take on the entire Metropolis Police Department in one panel. That's not going to work. But in the meantime, when we're doing all these things, we're locked up. And another thing I'm learning in this process is that getting materials, like we can't just go to the shop and get all the materials there. We have access to copy paper, if that was a very precious resource.
Wooden pencils.
And wooden number 2 pencils. And those things, we also had these little kid pencil sharpeners. And first I was using those, but I realized that I was breaking the pencil lead every second panel. And so it was getting to the point where I was breaking it constantly. And then,
I had to show him several times how to sharpen a pencil properly with just a thin blade that you actually get from a shaving razor, how to shave it down.
and yeah, so I had to artisanally shave this pencil. And the thing is, it's like we aren't supposed to break these razors apart. If we get caught doing this, if we get caught with these razors and stuff, that like that can count as a weapon and stuff like that.
Could cost you, it could literally keep you in prison longer.
Yeah. So we're keeping this on the down low about all of this. And like I was never throughout the whole process I was not like a super rule breaker. But this like I really wanted to do
He's
this.
never been a super rule breaker.
No. No.
He was not prison people. He didn't fit in.
I would argue who is, but yeah, I get yeah.
I was.
By that point, after yeah, but after but anyway, we were trying to sharpen pencils, and then on top of that, so we don't have Pixma pens either. He had access to Pixma pens because of this cool thing called Craft Shop, where basically it's one of the few ways inmates can sort of make money, and it's only.
But you're not supposed to bring those pencils and pens or anything
out
out of the craft shop.
Right, they're not supposed to leave, and that's where we that was another part of sneaking everything around, because we were using those outside of the craft shop, but for a long time I was just using a ballpoint pen to ink in my my comics, and like I was trying different things too with the ballpoint pen. Is like if you sit there and you scrape a ballpoint pen across a piece of cardboard for long enough, you can get the ink to run more, and you can get like darker darks and things like that. Or you have to just sit there and just go over the same thing over and over and over again with the ballpoint pen to take it from gray to black. And it was tedious stuff. And like I did that. I went through that Thorn comic, went from front to back. It's not amazing artwork. It's not stellar. I won't even say it's stellar storytelling. It was just fun. Like it was
an education.
Yes, and it was educational. But it was a process, and it got me totally into the comics making process. But it was one of those things that like had to keep on top of. And in the meantime, everyone has this idea that inmates are sitting in a cell all day long and that's it. No, that your life is basically run for you by outside forces. If you want to eat, you're gonna have to wait around in the day room for an hour, not without your drawing materials, and just sit there. And you might wait. I've waited up to 4 hours just sitting there waiting to go eat.
A lot of prison time is wasted in staging.
Right.
Because they have to herd all the inmates in between their daily functions, and so each one of these units they can have up to 5,000 people on it. So you can imagine during the course of a day, there's one chow hall or cafeteria, whatever you want to call it chow hall. 5,000 guys have to eat out of there. And so a big part of the day is spent just in herding the inmates 25 at a time down a hallway and 25 back so they can all eat. So a good part of your day is sitting around standing at locked doors or sitting at locked doors, just staring at them, waiting for them to let you eat or let you take a shower, things like that. Time that could be well spent, or if you're a comic book artist, time that you need to draw a comic book.
Right. To try and get that page a day if you're doing the artwork, or a page a day if you're doing the story work too, really. And that was one thing I will say too. On top of that, with doing the story, that helped me a whole lot during that whole process was I started doing like stick figure versions of the story, so I could see who's in the panels and stuff like that in advance. And since everything was on copy paper, I knew exactly what I needed. Just took a sheet of copy paper, drew out the panels the way I wanted them, and then had X number of stick figures in there. And I knew you could break it down a lot easier that way and see how much is going to fit into that space, which worked really well. And that's still something I do today when I'm writing stories, is I'll do it in stick figures in the same proportions of what the page is. But yeah, it is. But it's so much wasted time, and there's also drama. There's drama from officers, there's drama from the unit getting locked down, which is sometimes nice because then you can sit in your cell all day, but then you have whoever your cellmate is, and that may cause problems of getting along and trying to negotiate whatever drama that is. And of course, we're working full time. You have some sort of job that you're going to every day that you have to negotiate. And so one of the perks might be you might have like for me, I was working in supply, so I had access to pens and paper all the time. So, but yeah, you have to get it by stealing from supply. So that's how it goes. And that's kind of it was all this to try and make comics. So when it's been just over a year now that we've both been out, and got out around the same time. And basically, when we got out, we had piles of drawings and everything. I haven't even gone through the drawings and stories that I had done when I've been locked up. But Malone had Warp Ranger #1. He had actually handed it off.
30 years worth of several comic books. Warp Ranger #1 was one of many that I'd done, but it's the last one I'd done and one I thought was most worthy of pursuing.
And it looked great, just even on the copy paper and everything. The question is how do we take these 30 pages and turn it into a book, which neither of us knew how to do anything with. And the other thing was like we had everything, we had it inked and all that, but there was all the word balloons were all penciled in still. And so so we had to figure out how to do lettering as well.
For all the praise I get for drawing, when I write anything in the dialogue, the lettering, well, I don't get any praise anymore. All I hear is I need to find a letterer. I can't write for some reason, but I can draw. Like a doctor. At least it makes me feel better to think I'm like a doctor.
But so I'm asking Malone, I'm like, I was doing research because I knew he had these pages, and I'm finding out about printers and all this stuff, and I'm like, what needs to get done? He's like, we need to get it lettered. I'm like, didn't you have some Justin guy who was gonna get this thing lettered and all that kind of stuff? He's like, he's fallen off. I'm like,
the last minute.
Yes. So I'm like, all right. I'm like, I'll
had his name on the cover and everything. And then he falls off.
And so I'm like, all right, I'll do it. I'll go through. I'll figure it out. And I'm trying to figure out how the best way to do it. I download some software for my Mac, and it is a slow grinding process because I'm kind of just guessing. I'm watching some YouTube videos. I'm kind of doing this, but I will tell you from the YouTube videos I've watched, I've not found a spectacular way to letter. And some of them do this thing where they put all the word balloons in Photoshop and then put it in there. But I didn't have Photoshop. I just had the free cheap version, which I can probably figure out. But I was like, I'm just trying to get the words in the balloons. And
in my mind, I'm thinking, this guy's supposed to be an IT guy, no computers, and he can't figure out how to type words onto a piece of paper. What is going on?
Right. And I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, it's 2021. We don't know how to do this yet. There isn't a thing designed.
We or you?
The universe doesn't know how to make a software that I can use that can go into a balloon. And so I'm going. So I finally I get to the end, and I'm right as I'm about to the end, I'm like, Malone, I am never doing this again. I'm like, I hate this. I don't want to do it. This stinks.
He totally understood what Justin's point of view was.
Yes. And I was frustrated, but I was like, all right, we finally have everything we need to actually send this to the press. So then I start researching printing presses, and I'll tell you the number one thing that saved us was I went to the comic book shop and I asked them, and they recommended me to another local comic book artist, and he pointed me to, like, I had Googled all over the place and I found all these weird printing presses, and I'm like, we're gonna have to sell this book for $10 a pop. This is crazy. And then that comic book guy told me, he's like, look, check this place out. I was like, this is it. This is what we need to use. It was a printing press designed specifically for comic book, like for people making comic books. It has everything you like we needed, and plus it was already like, oh, and you can get this for when you go to the convention, and you can get this, and it's like trying to upsell you the entire way too. So it was getting that help from the local source, that was huge. And I don't know, so then we sent it to the press, and then suddenly we went from a pile of copy paper and a PDF file to 300 books in our hands. And the next thing was going back to that comic book shop and saying, all right, I've got the books now, and I want them on your shelf. Like, how do we do that? How do we make that happen? And luckily I was in, like, I live up in Longmont. It's not, so I'm not like this, it wasn't like I went directly to Time Warp or Mile High Comics and started trying to do that deal, because I can only imagine they could have totally taken advantage of the situation. But because I knew nothing. But these guys walked me through it, like, there's different ways to do it. You can do a consignment, you can do it other ways. And you also, like, do you have a written contract? And I had nothing. I just walked in with a box full of comics and was like ready to sell them. And
I had the exact opposite luck, because I took also a stack full of comic books to a place in Austin. It's like, hey man, do y'all support local artists? Yeah, great. How much you want for those? Just bought them out right off my hands for cash. Put them on the shelves. It's awesome.
yeah, so that might be too. Just going, it's going to be different at different places too, and it's also just the next big thing is just getting, like, the next thing was now getting places to sell the comic book. Like, so we're going to, the next big thing was actually since I'm up here in Colorado, he's in Texas. I was going to go to the first big art fest up in Longmont, and 3 days before the event, I test positive for COVID, and that kind of killed
It's like
a lot of
the third
momentum.
time he's tested positive for COVID.
Yeah, his first two were in prison, and that was not a fun place to.
He's been vaccinated and everything. This is the.
Yeah.
If you got COVID, stay away from this guy.
So, but yeah, that was. So, it's been slowly trying to, to get it, get the book in front of people. I've done taken it to a couple small shows, and then one big thing that I was here at my first comic book convention ever was last year in October to come and check this out, and because I had no idea, I've heard of conventions, but I've never been in one and seen how it works, and I went in and I scoped it out. This is his first one ever.
You guys are awesome in Colorado, by the way. I'm from Houston, right? I'm from Texas, and I have family in Colorado. I visited here when I was young, but being back here, y'all are awesome. Y'all are amazing.
So so basically, I'm trying to tell him, like I saw this. I was like, I'm trying to take pictures, but it doesn't. It's until you're here, it's hard to click it all into place. And then I will tell you, I learned so much last year I spent on the Saturday last year, I had basically booked just going and checking out panels that entire Saturday, just going from panel to panel and listening to people, and that helped me a lot. I went to some of the booths. I liked, like, the way they set up, that I felt were the most, like, eye catching, and I asked them how they do their printing, where do they get their prices at.
We absolutely did not do any of that either.
I went to print. I went to like that's how we found a site, which we found out was also was going to be too expensive for what we were trying to do at the time. But that was like, but it was a start. And then this time around, like we're like, all right, we're gonna have a booth this time. And then honestly, one of my goals last time when I came, I was like, because someone had said during one of the panels, is like, if you want, the best way to get a ticket is to have a panel. That was the best way to do it. And so I was like, all right, that's my goal. Like that's our goal for us next time, is that we will have a panel at Fan Expo. I didn't realize it was gonna be 6 months later. And so I set that goal, and then we actually got booth first, and then found out we had the panel, and I was like, this is gonna be crazy. So that's basically where we went from pretty much zero to having our self-published book, which also one of the other things that we learned about with the self-publishing is setting up a site, how to set up that was a constant fight. You've got people in Texas. So at one point I had all 300 copies of Warp Ranger just sitting in my room. And then Malone is telling everyone in Texas, hey, my book just came out.
And they're all telling me, right. You're a comic book artist, right.
And so we're trying to figure out how to all right, we got it on the shelf in one place, but like we got people in Texas who want it. We got people in Virginia who want it. We got people in Montana who want it. We got people all over the country who want this book, but we can't get it in their hands. And it's a hypothetical book at this point. And so that was, now I'm like, all right, we need to set up a site, we need to set up a presence. And after that was an abundance of options. Whereas the printing, it limited itself out by price. The looking online, there's so many options. If you're an artist and you want to sell your product, you can do a million different things. I honestly, the reason I selected, we went with Wix to set up this site, and the reason I wanted to do it was because I wanted to have a cool website that people could go to. And then and they also had a big discount if you signed up for them for an extended period of time. So I'm like, cool. And then it just so happened that because they're so popular, there were so many plugins that now we could make Warp Ranger t-shirts and Warp Ranger masks and Warp Ranger bathing suits. And socks, yes. And it was getting out. Yeah. So now anything we need to make, we could make now. And we could ship our comic from place to place and figure out the shipping, which was that was such a huge help. And now I basically I have like a little label maker and everything in my apartment, so that whenever anyone orders it, I got the envelope, the comic, and everything ready to ship right out.
It's kind of funny because when we first got started doing it, we first got the book published, and then this whole other side of comic books that we had totally neglected ever even thinking about existing. You spend all this time thinking about how to make a comic book. How do I draw? Learning how to draw and all this stuff. And you invest so much in those skills and concentrate on it, and you think you've got it mastered, just to get the book in your hand and go, what the hell do you do with this now? And everybody's like, well, how do I get your book? And other than me just getting in a car and driving it to them, I had no idea. We were hit with so many different things we had no idea even existed. And he's constantly calling me, telling me, it's going to cost $15 to just in shipping to get this book to Canada. I'm like, man, that's somebody's trying to con you, man. There can't possibly be how much it costs to get a book to Canada. But it turns out it's the truth. things like that were all things that we had to learn how to navigate, get around, and try to make, ways around and figure it out. And slowly but surely we did, It's only as you hit walls, you got to imagine, in any kind of endeavor like this, there's plenty of blind spots. Even no matter how well you prepare for it, there's going to be things that you don't know that are going to pop up. And everything, we didn't know anything. So everything was one of those pop-ups. But as you hit each wall, if you just have that kind of attitude, the same attitude that told you I could draw a comic book in the first place if I really want to, it's the same attitude that'll get you past all those other things. We read Dave Sims' guide, Cerebus Guide to Self-Publishing, right? It was very inspirational to both of us. I highly recommend that book to anybody, but the information in there about how to publish and distribute books is dated. So don't try to go by that.
I will say that was one thing I was Malone had forever talked about self-publishing. From the moment I met him, he's talking about you need to self-publish. You need to write stories with your own characters. You need to turn this Green Lantern story into your own story. And I'm like, no, it doesn't make any sense without the this and that. And I kept on dragging my feet. And then Malone had loaned out his comics, like a huge stack of his comics, to a friend of mine. So in prison, everyone's in different parts of the unit. So at this point, I wasn't even on the unit. I was at a trustee camp, and he loaned it to another trustee that was a couple bunks away from me. And we were talking, and I saw this huge stack of comics. I'm like, I want to read those. He's like, they're Malone's. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to read them. And so I go through and I see the guide to self-publishing, and I read it.
He's also a prison comic book collector, not just an artist. 30 years worth of comic books. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I've got Rob Liefeld issues of Youngblood in there at the bottom of the stack, and there's, at the top of the stack was Paul Pope.
And I remember when I first met him too, I'm like, I don't have time to read all these comics. I'm a writer. I don't have time to read all that stuff. And then I'm like, I need to read everything. But I started, honestly, I was like, I looked through it. The guide to self-publishing is printed exactly like a comic, except for there's no pictures. It's all words. And so I opened it and I'm looking for pictures. I'm like, I'll start in the middle and I'll probably give up on it. And I started in the middle and I just read all the way to the end, and I went right back to the beginning and reread everything. And I was like, we should be doing this. I'm like, I came back to Malone like this was new information to him.
He's the only person that's ever read that book, though, that felt that way. Other than me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question. So obviously you had some limitations in prison, and you mentioned, figuring out how to make stick figures. It sounds like maybe you didn't have all the colors that you would have wanted, or...
Oh, the book is in black and white.
Okay.
I did the covers in color because you do have access, like you mentioned, the craft shop. I was actually a unit artist for a while. That was my job. And because of that, it gave me access to the craft shop, and I bought, watercolor paint, things like that. I didn't have computers or any of that type of stuff. There's none of that in there. But I taught myself how to paint. I taught myself how to do all those things.
No YouTube.
No, YouTube. They don't have any internet in prison.
They did have a channel in the craft shop that eventually they did get, which would play YouTube videos, but it was not how-to videos.
It was TikTok videos of people, falling down off stuff and all that.
But does anyone else have any other questions? We still have plenty of time. Yes, please.
Did you guys look into Kickstarter?
No.
Or did you look into crowdfunding?
That is something we talked about, or that is something you talked about.
I've had people suggest this to me, right? And to tell you the truth, we just did it without it. I've never seen a way that I could make that work.
Do you guys have a booth upstairs?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
A website? I tried Googling your thing and
It's Wayword, but it's WORD. So waywordpress.com.
All one word.
Yes.
And you can find me at They call me Malone on Instagram. You can see all my artwork there, or see a lot of it at least.
Yeah, and we'll afterwards we do still have our booth up there, and we'll be up there chilling for a bit, and we can show you the comic.
You can come and look at the comic book. You can get some stickers. We have free stickers.
Yes, we have free stickers with if it's still not working, it has our internet address and our Instagram and everything on it too.
On the back.
Yeah. And we're happy to do that too. Yeah.
Is your comic book in prison that you guys read?
No, oh my God.
Huh?
What was that now?
Do we mail? Yeah. So you were asking if we mailed the warden a copy. Did we mail it to like the library or anything like that at the
No,
prison
we
we were at?
mailed our friends though that are still in prison. We mailed them some issues of the comic,
And
we're very proud of it.
And we snuck them a sticker. That's not allowed. A sticker. Sticker. Yeah. But yeah.
I thought you were asking if the setting of the book was was in prison. I had so many people keep asking me, "Hey, why don't you do a comic book about prison?" I'm like, I'm in prison. I don't want to sit around drawing about prison. I draw to escape prison. The last thing I want to do is draw pictures of prison all day.
There was a story I did. I had this book called Just in Time, and the main character starts off in prison. And I'm like, he needs to get out of prison, like right away. I do not like drawing bars on everything. It's really depressing. Anybody else?
Yes.
Is there anything about learning to do this in prison that makes you better than maybe you would have been without it?
The only thing I can see that would make me better is it just gives me, it just proves to me that anybody can do it and that it can be done. I never get to a point where I'm saying this is impossible, I can't do it anymore, because how easy it is to do out here compared to where I was, and I was dedicated to it, and it just proves to me the power of dedication.
And that's honestly, anytime I have an excuse like I want to make, it immediately drops out of my head. Like if I'm like, I'm too tired, I don't want to, like, this is going to be too hard, or this is going to be, and I'm trying to talk myself out of it. I'm like, oh yeah, I did this already before in prison, and I didn't have access to anything. That was something I even told myself when I was in prison. I said, when I get out, I'm gonna have access to the internet. I'm good. Like that solves most of the problems. There were so many times if I had a question, I'd have to write someone a letter, a handwritten letter, send it to them, hope they got it, because there's plenty of times they didn't get it. Hope they got it, and then wait for their response. So that's about a month if it's quick. And there's plenty of parts where that, and then I'm trying to figure out what I need to do in the meantime with all of that time waiting for that letter.
Yes, please.
Do you guys have any how to draw books, or were those allowed?
There were a lot of how to draw books in prison, and there is a library in prison, and actually one of our buddies worked in the library and was very nice about hooking us up. One issue I saw with the how to draw books was that they anytime there's anything cool in the book, most people in prison, the way that they learn to draw is they just take the picture and they use it as a template, and then they just trace it over and over again. And a lot of times, you'll see in the library books, the lines are dented in the books because inmates are sitting there drawing in it so many times. And if they don't want to do that, if it's something really cool, they'll just cut it out of the book and then return it.
Cool stuff's gone.
And whereas that was prison whenever he was there. Whenever I first got there and started drawing, they didn't have any how to draw books in prison. Not that you couldn't get them if you wanted them, but I actually, what really got me going was I was in the county jail, and it was like 17, 18 years old, about to go to prison, and my mom took a flight somewhere, and there was a little magazine that was there in front of her seat in the plane, and whenever she picked it up, it had an article in there about comic books. It was about Image Comics, so it had just gotten started then. And so she sent that to me, and it was so inspirational that I started drawing. I was interested in comic books before I went to prison. When I was a kid, I read comic books, but that actually made me feel like I could draw them for some reason. So I started getting comic books. How I started learning was I took these comic books and I studied them kind of like a how-to draw book. I looked at every single line in these books. How did he make a nose? Oh, well, it's a line like this, a line like that, and a line like this type of thing. And I mixed and matched. I would look at I'd find all these artists that I like, and I would say, oh, well, I like the way this guy does this. I like the way this guy does that. And I would mix and match stuff and start making my own characters. And it eventually kind of formed into my own style and kind of mental library of how of things I refer to that I used over the years. I only did that for maybe my first 2 or 3 years of trying to draw, and then after that, it just was so ingrained in me that I didn't need it anymore.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, how do you feel like stylistically your art has changed since getting out of prison and having, I don't know, more access to supplies?
I think stylistically my art is always changing. I don't feel like anything that I do is, I look back over the course of all my drawings and stuff that I thought I was embarrassing at one point, now I'm proud of, and stuff that I'm proud of now I'll look at and I'm like, I'm embarrassed by it. But I think it's always changing. I hope it's always changing because I hope I'm improving.
Yes.
Outside of literally writing about prison, have your experiences influenced some of the ways that you write or draw? Like maybe bits of stories, bits of emotion? Definitely.
There's undercurrents and everything. If you read Warp Ranger all the way through, you'd probably see, a sci-fi type of story, a space western or whatever, but there's much deeper subtext that runs all the way through it. Now, of course, it doesn't come through in the very first issue because, you have a much deeper storyline that goes all the way through it. But things like the dehumanization that people go through in prison and so forth else, those were issues that I address in my stories, but I don't do so directly. It's just, I see them there, I see them in people's faces and minds, but no one really cares. Or at least most people that you talk to don't really care. It's not, but if you can put it in the subtext of a story, I think a lot of times it kind of goes around the more obvious routes that people either reject or just block off information from and gets in anyways.
For me, it was like I was constantly exposed to this crazy cast of characters. So there's lots of things I like picking up on. There's fun. I know, that was one thing I picked up for in Thorn is trying to pick up, is I was picking out character traits from people around me that were, especially because you're in this really crazy environment. So a lot of the craziest attributes of people come out and people flip out on the simple, small stuff. And those are really interesting moments.
That was a really cool question, by the way.
Yes, absolutely. And the other big thing is, now I always question myself when I'm writing, I like writing about superheroes, but I don't there's a big story that we want to work on together is this kind of what if Spider-Man and Superman were in the same universe and they both worked at the Daily Bugle? So we're working on that story, and I don't like this idea of if a character is either pure good or pure evil. If there's usually intentions, and then I'm curious to see how those could turn out. And I don't ever try and paint a character a certain way. And if I do paint them a certain way, then I'm trying to see how I can get them out of it and get them into something else.
That's funny for him to say, because this is the purest hearted person you'll ever meet in your life.
I don't know. Is there any other questions? Do we have a little more time? Okay. We have a couple more minutes.
Thank you guys for listening to us. I didn't think anybody was going to be here, so I can't imagine why y'all want to hear anything I have to say, but I'm here and I talked.
Where did you say your was upstairs?
It is actually an author's alley. It is so it's the first row all the way, if you're right when you come in, it's all the way on the right. So
It's the least adorned table.
Yeah, these were holding up our posters. Like these tripods were changed around to hold up our posters.
When you just see two guys sitting at a blank table, that's us.
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
Did you say you had a podcast that you do?
Yes, we do. So also, it's also, I don't think there's a link on there, but it's shakedown.show is the website where you can find it. And we actually talk about comics on there, and we talk about criminal justice is the main thing we focus on there. And
We whine about all the bad stuff we had to go through in prison.
You know, we try and tackle a serious question, like do we need prisons, or do we we kind of explain what's going on in prison and then just say, go use our stories as a jumping off point. I think, did you have a question?
I was just going to ask how we can follow up on social media to learn more about you guys. I know you mentioned it.
Yeah, shakedown.show, at Wayword Press, and there are more, and yeah, if you come up to the booth, we will give you plenty more social media too. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm an educator, so I work with lots of children from everywhere because I'm in museums.
Yes.
And over the years, I've had a few who have been sentenced. University of Denver just started a project where they started a radio show in a prison. And I was wondering what you guys thought of programs like that. Do you think they're helpful? Do you think if there had been a program where you guys could go and draw would actually be helpful?
Yeah, it probably wouldn't help everybody, but people are different. I know myself, and there's other people that having in a situation like prison, it can go two ways, right? It can go, you can get involved in the negativity that's going on in prison, and there's plenty of it, and most people do take that path. Or you can get yourself involved in something, find something that you can engage your mind in, and, you know, that you're passionate about, that you can give yourself over to, and that can actually save you. And that's what I did, and I think that, anybody that's in those types of situations could do exactly the same thing.
One big thing is what is the intention behind it. The intention is just we have this so we can say that we have this program. Then it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to be too helpful. But I really love that idea. Like I heard about that program that's broadcasting to prisons. I think it's great. I would love to be behind the mic. But to show a flip side of it, I was actually a writer for the prison newspaper, and they published zero of what I wrote because
he wasn't a good writer.
I know, yes. Yes, I was not a good writer for that paper because I questioned what was going on and wanted to actually, I didn't want to talk up the prison, and there was their story was, you're here for a reason and you need to smile while you're here.
You need to wrap it up.
Yes, but yeah.
You can't quit talking.
No, I can't. But anyway, we really want to thank you guys for being here, and we'll be upstairs if you have more questions and want to talk more, and we'd love to show you our stuff. That was our panel at Fan Expo Denver. To learn more about the Shakedown, you can go to our website, shakedown.show. You can also see our other projects at waywordpress.com. That's WAYWORD press.com. You can also check out our Instagram at GetTheShakedown, at Wayword Press, and at They Call Me Malone with underscores. See you next time.